I'm thrilled to welcome Marteena Rodriguez-Drinnen to the Homeschool Ways podcast today. Marteena
Hi.
is a lawyer and a mother and a children's pastor. And as of recently, she has started to write books for children. She's working on a whole book series about Tiny Tail, The Adventures of Tiny Tail. Martina, welcome to the podcast. Tell us more about your background.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So as far as the background, would you like the background of the book or background of me? What are you looking
Let's
for first?
start with you as the author, first of all, you as the attorney
Okay.
who you're doing a lot of conflict resolution. You're working with a lot of kids and dispute and a lot of psychology. Tell us more about that.
My background is psychology. I got my bachelor's down at Florida International University. And then I realized just it wasn't working out for me. There was The graduate program is very difficult to get into and extremely competitive. So I had to go back into my classes and figure out what's my next step because I thought God was putting me in psychology. And then he's like, no. So I'm like, great. When I went back through all of my psychology courses, I found that everything that touched law, so evidence psychology, eyewitness testimony, forensic interviews, all of that, that's where my strong suits were. So I jumped into law. Came up here in 2017 to Lincoln Memorial University. Studied there for 3 years, graduated during COVID, so that was fun. Our bar exam was postponed. During that time, we just kept going through, finally took the bar exam. And I will say this, failed the first time. And I was like, God, you put me out here. What am I supposed to do? And God's like, I have you. So took it again the following year and passed it. So yeah, even if it feels like a failure, you could still go through it. So I hope, that encourages somebody. Um, so yeah, after that, my husband, I met him in law school. We didn't start dating until after law school. So kind of just came up here, settled down. We got married in 22, had kiddo in 23, and no, I'm sorry, had kiddo in 24. Yes, yeah, got pregnant in 23, had kiddo in 24, and it's just been a wild ride since. Yeah. So practicing law, I practiced law starting in December of 2021. And then at 3 months after my kiddo was born, I was planning to go back, but God had other plans. So I ended up turning back to my writing.
Everything you said resonates with me on so many levels. I'm a few stages ahead of you in the motherhood journey, but I was going to be a lawyer. And everything you said about God, showed you psychology, then all of a sudden you're being pivoted and you're like, oh, what is this? And God
Yes.
still reassured you, I'm still here. I'm still here. Stay with me. So, and the other thing you said about failing forward, I love that. That's like a new thing that I learned last year. You fail
Really?
forward. And so many times I look back on my life and I'm like, oh man, I blew it over there, and then I realized, no, that was a setup for something different, for something new, for
Mm-hmm.
something that showed me, a different path, or the next step was, you know and but I like the fact that it was like you needed perseverance. You tried again, trying
Mm-hmm.
again. And I appreciate that. Yeah, we need to encourage our audience. Success is a series of failures,
Yes.
and you keep at it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book. It's by Bobby Bones called Fail Until You Don't. And that book is phenomenal.
I've never heard of that, but I have the Alex Hormozy version in my head, where he says, at first you suck and then you suck less until you don't suck anymore.
Oh, I've not heard that one, but yes, I like that.
It's the same thing, you know. So, and that applies to everything. You know, my audience is homeschool moms. We are not sure how to do this homeschool thing. We just know we have a calling. All
Hmm.
we have to do is be a mother and apply some common sense and trial and error. And if
Yeah.
something doesn't work, just try something else, or maybe try the same thing at a different time of the day, you know.
Yeah.
So going back to, you're an attorney now, you're working, all of a sudden you get married, you become a mom. Walk us through that transition
Oh,
between, okay, I'm in the courtroom and dealing with disputes and children and emotional needs, and all of a sudden I become a mother myself, and
hmm.
something switched.
Oh, so that was a hard one for me. So I had taken the month before my son was here. So my son was born in March. So I took February off to try and get everything closed and put on hold until I came back in the summer. That was my goal. At that point, I practiced strictly juvenile law. Now, sometimes that's representing parents, sometimes it's representing kids, sometimes it's siding with the state, sometimes against the state. You wear a ton of different hats, just depending on the case and who you're representing. Um, I had my son in March, and my husband also worked juvenile law, and he was practicing one of his arguments. So we had put my son for a nap time, and it was actually in here. I'm sitting on that couch, and he's sitting here, and he's going through his arguments for a very graphic case. And I'll leave it at that. It's juvenile law, so yeah, we're just gonna leave it at that. And I had to tell him, you need to stop talking. And he's like, what do you mean? Like, does the argument not make sense? And I go, I can't hear this right now. And he was a little worried. I was too, because a big skill that you have to have as an attorney is the ability to disassociate. A lot of people can't handle certain areas of law because they take it home with them. And I don't know if you know this, but alcohol rates and substance abuse are high among attorneys, just like police, just like I think it was doctors as well, because you see the worst of the worst every single day. And if you can't disassociate, if you start taking that home with you, it can really affect your family. And so when he was going through the case, all I could imagine was, and it's all allegations, I will say that, but all I can imagine is, what if that was my kid? And at that point, I knew, I said, I'm supposed to go back next month and I can't do this right now. So that was very scary. Because again, psychology, God says, okay, no, we're not going through that route. Law, awesome, I made it through. Now, what am I supposed to do if I can't do what I was doing? It was terrifying. Um, but after that, it was almost, I did go deep in my word for a little bit. And I was like, God, I don't know what you want, because if I can't work, what am I supposed to do? And I just heard, trust me. And I go, yeah, I don't like that answer. Can you give me like a bullet point plan as to what I'm supposed to do? And
Uh-huh.
he's like, no, you just need to trust me. And so my kiddo just became my whole world. And everything from that point, I looked at my husband and he says, I got it. I'll figure it out. But if you can't go back, if you don't want to go back, I'm here. And when you do, we'll figure it out again too. So he's been very supportive in everything.
Yeah, again, it's such a powerful story, and I've heard it a couple of times with other moms as well, and it happened to me also. I was going to go to law school. I didn't even, I got admitted, but I didn't get there because in the meantime, I met my husband. He derailed me. And I was going to be an immigration lawyer. I speak, you know, several languages. I immigrated. You know, I would have done either international law or immigration law. And I was telling this to somebody very recently, I think 2 days ago. And she said, honey, God knew what he was doing. He pivoted you because right about now, being an immigration lawyer would be very, very bad,
Yes.
very
Mm-hmm.
stressful, what to touch
Yep.
on your point about alcoholism among lawyers and stress levels, you got to
Mm-hmm.
cope, and unfortunately sometimes alcohol becomes a coping mechanism for attorneys. But
And
yeah,
it
I was going
becomes
to
a
be a lawyer.
slippery slope.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I said, well, what's the next best thing? I'm going to be a realtor. So
Yeah.
I was a realtor when I remember being pregnant with my first child. And I walked into the broker's office and I said, I want to keep working after I give birth. I said, I don't know when I'm going to come back. Of course, we are independent contractors as realtors.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
he looked at me, he goes, Adriana, I cannot tell you how much to work, when to return. You are an independent contractor. He was very much abiding by the law,
Mm-hmm.
employment
Yeah.
law. And I'm like, yeah, but I just want to say, and he was like, you're an agent. You can do whatever you want. Of course, once you hold your little bundle of joy in your arms, the whole world changes.
Mm-hmm.
The whole world changes. And so I wanted to stay home. For the first
Yeah.
5 years of my child's life, I thought I'm just going to be on the floor with cubes, with wooden blocks, And then God started coming to me about 3 years into this. I had a 3-year-old and then I had a newborn. And he started talking to me about homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
So if he had given me a bullet point list right when I got pregnant, I would not have accepted that.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yep.
totally hear you with the trust me. Just trust me, just take it one day at a time. It could be foggy ahead. Just come through the fog.
Mm-hmm.
Um, very good. So going back to your story, you're now a mom. You decide that you cannot handle some of the aspects of juvenile law.
Mm-hmm.
And how did the idea of a book come to you?
So at that point, we had been at church, and the pastor's wife during that time, and I'm not going to name drop just because I didn't get any permission to talk about anyone specific.
Sure.
But the pastor's wife at that time, she was having baby number two. And I started noticing that baby number one was showing signs of regression and attention seeking. So I said, huh, that's interesting. And I didn't say anything about it. Then a friend of mine who is also from law school, she practices in another state. We were talking, and she was also having baby number two. And baby number one was showing signs of regression and an increase in attention seeking. So I said, that's interesting. Why is that? And then my husband and I are also firstborns. So he couldn't really tell me anything. I had to go through his parents to try and like see if that was a normal thing. But I remember because I'm 5 years older than my sibling. He's 2 years older than his. So I remember that when my sibling was born, I was like, hold up. The world is kind of shifted here. What's going on? And it was almost like a fear of, I guess, being replaced. And so I start watching the kids more. And again, it was, the regression, and I noticed it was a pattern. Well, we always knew we wanted another kiddo at some point. And I kind of drafted the story in my notes one day and showed it to my husband, and his exact words, wow, with some editing, this might actually be good. And I went, thank you so much. That hits. But he's very honest with me. And it was a simple story of, hey, you're not going to be replaced. Everything's going to be fine. Things are going to change, right? Because there's another little kid in the house. So it's not all about you, but doesn't mean that you're loved any less, right? It's just a transition. And so that's how like the story came to be.
Mhm. Yeah, so the book series is The Adventures of Tiny Tail. And
Hmm.
this first volume is called always room for more,
Mm-hmm.
which is always room for another child, always room for a sibling, always room for more love and more
Mm-hmm.
grace and more family. So yeah, that makes sense. We're about to get back to the show, but first I want to address my audience in terms of something I read recently in an Alison Armstrong book called The Queen's Code. It really hit me hard when she said that women bury themselves in books and movies, Netflix, when their environment is loud and is just screaming at them, when they're overwhelmed by their environment. And I love books, and I try not to lose myself in Netflix, but it happens now and then. And so, what I want to encourage you to do right now is sort of organize your environment so it doesn't scream at you that much. It's research based. Everything that Allison writes about is research based. And she explains it very well how our psyche as women, we pick up on everything that's around us. So, my question to you is, how's your homeschool organized? How organized do you feel in your homeschool? And if you need some help, some calm guidance and clear questions to just sort of walk yourself through, um, go to my blog, homeschoolways.com/organized. I've put down some questions, some PDF downloads, and go ahead and walk yourself through all that and maybe make the environment around you scream at you less. It's a journey, it's a process, it doesn't happen overnight. Now let's get back to the show. Marteena, faith and family are your top priorities. They're also mine. I want to know, how does your faith shape the messages in Tiny Tale?
So I have to rewind just a little bit in order to fully explain where I'm going, if that's all right.
Yeah.
When I entered into the psychology realm, I wanted to follow into the footsteps of Dr. Dobson. Now, I don't know if you know who he is. If you've been in the Christian environment for a while, focus on the family. If you've watched Veggie Tales or Adventures in Odyssey, he's a name, like a household name.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, and I love him, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps. He was a clinical psychologist, and his whole research is based on society is broken because the house is broken, the family unit is broken.
Mm,
And if you look at studies, when there's no father in the home, there is a higher chance of violence and turn to criminality among the next generation, so among the children. And so all of his research and all of his resources can be found through the Focus on the Family site. They have things for spouses, they have things for parents and for kids. The problem that I see is that unless you go to a Christian church or you were part of a Christian school, you don't really know what Focus on the Family is. That's where Tiny Tale comes in. I I specifically made the Tiny Tale series, the Tiny Tale books, so that it could go into any home at any time and break out of the walls of the churches and the schools. So the books themselves will not mention Jesus. They don't mention church or things of that nature. What they do is they form a model of what a traditional household looks like. There's love, there's honesty, there's communication. All of the morals, biblical morals, are in there. They just don't outrightly say from the Bible. And I do that because I want it to be the stepping stone to get people interested. Because maybe if they read the book, then maybe they can dive into who I am and then explore what I believe. And that's great, but I want the books to be able to go outside the church walls where Dr. Dobson was able to stay within the church walls. So kind of perform like a model of what the family is supposed to look like, and maybe even role models for kids. Because John Avery Whitaker, Adventures in Odyssey, he was mine. So I
Yeah.
loved him. I listened to so many Adventures in Odyssey growing up. So if I could do that for other kids, that would just be amazing.
Yeah, I got all the CDs for my kids 10, 15
Mhm.
years ago. We couldn't really listen online, so I had a CD in the car, and everywhere we
Hmm.
went. I still have the whole stack of CDs. I don't know where we would listen to them anymore, but when I was decluttering, that was one thing my daughter said, we're not, we're not taking
Hmm.
these to McKay's, or, we're not donating these. We're
Nope,
keeping
they're
them.
mine. Yep.
Yeah. So, yes. And as far as James Dobson, I have been so blessed by their research, their free PDFs, their books that they recommend. If you need a subject, a topic covered, you just go to their website and they'll have it. And I feel like I'm one degree of separation from James Dobson, because I used to work for Raymond Moore, and Raymond and James were friends. And when homeschooling
Ah.
came about in the 80s, and Dr. Raymond Moore was like the grandfather of the homeschooling movement, he was interviewed on Focus on the Family about this new concept of homeschooling. And to this day, I meet people who say, I watched that first appearance of Dr. Moore on Focus on the Family with Dr. James Dobson, and he inspired me to homeschool my children. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm one degree of separation. And I remember talking to Dr. Moore, because I work for him in Washington State at his foundation, and he would say, "Yeah, when James and I sat down and we talked about this, I'm like, oh, okay."
That's
But
awesome. I didn't know that. That's really cool.
yeah, yeah. So we go way back. So I read Dr. Moore's books when I was in college. I had a minor in education, so that was an education book about better late than early. The readiness of a child to start school. Where is it? He did a lot of research, because the state of California, where he was living at the time, wanted to introduce universal preschool.
Hmm.
And that would have meant children as early as 3. If they turned 4 during the school year, they would have to go into a system. And he did research, and he had a PhD. And so if everybody believed him, they actually stopped the legislation from happening, because he showed them they're not ready to be in a classroom. These are tiny kids. Anyway,
Hmm.
so I read his book. Then I met him in Sweden. I was working for an educational foundation up there, and he came to be one of our instructors during like a short module, and took him shopping with his daughter. It was fun. And then he asked me to go work for him like a year later. So that was brief. Then I moved to Tennessee. So that's my little background. I'm not trying to drop names. I'm just trying to give the background of how much we appreciate these titans in the traditional Christian education space, James Dobson and Dr. Raymond Moore. So, looking ahead, you plan to homeschool?
I do. Yes.
Very good. And tell me about these books. How do you think a homeschool family could use these books in their routine?
So my first goal is to get, and I've been able to get into some of the more secular schools. So I've been able to do that. Um, as far as homeschool goes, my plan is this is only book one. Book two is hopefully going to come out in March. So my plan is Father Fox is very scientific. He believes in teaching through nature. So if you see in book one, he teaches using green peppers. In the second book, you'll see that he is there and he's kind of teaching alongside, and there's bumblebees involved, and I'll leave that as a little surprise. So he's all about nature. And when I even do these events with my husband, I dress up as Mother Otter. He dresses up as Father Fox. And Father Fox is the one that does the science experiments with the kids. The kids love it. Mother Otter, on the other hand, her strengths are literature. She loves to read and cooking. She loves to cook and experiment with new foods. So if you go on the Facebook page, that we have, we often put in like little recipes here and there to try with your kiddos at home. And then, of course, Tiny Tail. He's an artist and an adventurer. That's all he wants to do is arts and crafts all day and go adventuring. So my hope is to use the characters along with homeschool teaching lessons. So if there are certain lessons having to do with nature, there's Father Fox right there and kind of walking them through. And if it deals with literature or home ec or culinary, then that's all Mother Otter. And then if it has to do with hiking or artsy stuff, creating things out of cardboard boxes like they did with Out of the Box, if you remember that as kids. Then that's all him. So that's my goal is to be able to make lesson plans with the characters that the kids already kind of know. So it seems more cool and it's cooler coming from these characters than just mom and dad.
Right, right. Very good. Yes, that sounds very much like almost a full curriculum and like value and moral curriculum.
Mhm.
There used to be a series that covered specific values. Well, Marteena, thank you so much for coming. I will put in the show notes several links to your content, to your book.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you again for coming and spending this time with us. And I want to wish you Godspeed.
Thank you so much.